Today, we're really digging into two quite different ways companies are thinking about AI safety. We're looking at Meta's approach, which seems more iterative, maybe reactive, versus Anthropic's, which is, well, built on proactive safety principles right from the start.
Right. And the core question really is this: should safety be baked in from day one, fundamentally, or is it okay, maybe even necessary, to adapt and adjust as you go, even if that means fixing things after launch?
Exactly. I'll be exploring the side that argues, well, adaptable guidelines, even if they're not perfect initially, can evolve. That maybe this iterative refinement is actually quite practical.
And I'll be arguing that no, you really need those foundational proactive measures, that they're non negotiable, frankly, to prevent harm from the outset. We'll be looking closely at Meta's internal Gen AI content risk standards, the ones that initially allowed some pretty alarming chatbot interactions, and contrasting that with Anthropic's constitutional AI framework, which tries to embed ethics directly.
Okay, so jumping right in, I see your point about initial flaws. Definitely. Meta's initial guidelines, well, they clearly raised eyebrows and needed fixing. But the fact that they were removed, even if it took external scrutiny, which isn't ideal, I grant you, shows a system capable of adjustment. In a field moving this fast, AI is evolving constantly. Isn't this kind of resilience, this ability to correct course, even after the fact, isn't that actually an advantage in some ways? It allows for maybe a more agile refinement as totally unforeseen issues pop up?
Mm, I'm sorry, but framing that as resilience well, it feels a bit dangerous. The fact that these guidelines, which reportedly passed Meta's own ethics and legal reviews, explicitly allowed things like romantic or sensual chats with teenagers or giving, frankly, dangerous medical advice, that suggests a really profound initial failure, not just a need for tweaking. Relying on public exposure to force corrections means harm, or at least significant potential harm, has already happened. It's not just an imperfect guideline. It feels like a systemic breakdown in prioritizing safety before launch. Anthropic's approach, the constitutional AI, it tries to give the model its own internal ethical check, right? Reviewing output against principles like the UN Declaration of Human Rights before a user ever sees it. The whole point is to try and stop these problems from happening in the first place.
I hear that argument. Absolutely. But then, isn't there a risk that a completely rigid, predefined framework like Anthropic's constitution perhaps could end up being too stifling? Especially in AI where things change seemingly week by week. Meta's public criticisms of things like the EU AI Act, they often center on that act being too prescriptive. You could argue that reflects a desire for frameworks that, well, allow for that iterative learning and adaptation, rather than hard rules that might just hinder innovation or struggle to keep pace with risks we haven't even thought of yet, risks that maybe only emerge through real-world use.
I respectfully disagree there. That kind of reactive learning inherently accepts a certain level of harm, or at least unacceptable risk, before correction happens. The material we looked at explicitly notes Meta's internal cultures seem to treat some of these serious safety concerns almost like a technical puzzle to cleverly sidestep, rather than drawing clear ethical lines in the sand from the beginning. When your initial standards allow for such, frankly, egregious content, it signals a deeper issue, doesn't it? Maybe prioritizing engagement or speed over truly embedding safety. Anthropic's commitment isn't just words. They actively attack their own systems, right? Through red team exercises, it's like cybersecurity penetration testing, but for AI ethics, specifically trying to find vulnerabilities and biases before the public does. That demonstrates a proactive push for predictable ethical behavior, which seems fundamentally safer.
Okay, but even with Anthropic's proactive stance, let's be realistic. No approach is going to be absolutely flawless. The source material itself mentions Anthropic facing its own ethical questions regarding the data used to train some models. So challenges clearly still arise, even when you have the best intentions and a proactive framework. My core point is simply that acknowledging and correcting flaws, however late it happens, still moves a system towards safer outcomes overall. It's got to be a continuous process, surely, not just a one-time fix at the design stage.
But the crucial difference, I think, is how those flaws surface and get addressed. Meta's problematic rules apparently passed multiple layers of review inside the company, only to be fixed after external pressure and public reporting. That points to a lack of robust pre-launch safeguards, wouldn't you say? Anthropic's transparency around its principles, coupled with actively trying to break its own models through red teaming, that's about anticipating and preventing harm from the start, or at least trying much harder to. It just feels like a far more robust foundation for building long-term trust and actual safety.
Well, we've certainly explored this real tension between an adaptive, maybe reactive approach to AI safety and one that's more
For the latest tech
proactive
insights,
and
visit
principle-driven from the start.
em360tech.com.
The material does show how Meta eventually corrected flawed provisions after they came to light, demonstrating, yes, a capacity to learn and adapt.
But it also clearly highlights Anthropic's focus on transparent, preventative methods like their public constitution and those red team exercises. So the question left for listeners to ponder, I suppose, is where does genuine long-term trust and advantage in AI ultimately lie? Is it in prioritizing things that might lead to errors needing correction later, or is it in truly embedding safety into the core framework as the absolute foundation of innovation?
For the latest tech insights, visit em360tech.com.